Today, Bitcoin crosses $64,000 as the cryptocurrency continues to move higher. Craig Wright, who claimed to be the inventor of Bitcoin, has been referred to UK prosecutors for alleged perjury. And Brian Dixon, CEO of Off-the-Chain Capital, breaks down how an approval of spot Ether ETFs could impact the trajectory of crypto prices. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Mackenzie Sigalos. Crypto prices in the green once again this morning, with Bitcoin trading close to $65,000 as of noon Eastern. Ether jumped more than 3% to $3,477, and Solana shot up more than 5%. Now, prices jumped following a report from Reuters yesterday evening, citing three industry sources as saying that the SEC has given preliminary approval to at least 3 of the 8 asset managers hoping to launch spot Ether ETFs to begin trading next Tuesday. Now, according to Reuters, the approval hinges on applicants submitting final offering documents to regulators before the end of the week, with one source reportedly saying that all are expected to launch at the same time, just like when spot Bitcoin ETFs began trading in January. BlackRock, VanEck, and Franklin Templeton are among the asset managers whose applications for spot Ether ETFs could get the green light from the SEC next week. That's reportedly expected to happen on Monday afternoon, with trading in the products expected to begin the next day. We reached out to the SEC for comment, but didn't hear back right away. Meantime, according to Citi Research, spot Ether ETFs could see net inflows of up to $5.4 billion in the first 6 months after they launch. The research says that spot ETFs could see 30 to 35% of spot Bitcoin ETF flows, but that the distribution is skewed to the downside. Now, focusing on Bitcoin, last week, the cryptocurrency was trading below the $60,000 level, but Bitcoin's value has risen since the failed assassination attempt of Trump on Saturday. Investors see an increased chance of a Trump victory in the upcoming presidential election, impacting a range of markets, including crypto, given that Trump's recent crypto stance has really picked up momentum in the last few months. Now, on top of that, yesterday, the presumptive Republican nominee announced that he chose crypto-friendly Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential candidate. Now, in 2022, Vance disclosed that he held between $100,001 to $250,000 of Bitcoin on Coinbase. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. The CFTC has agreed to a $4 billion settlement with FTX, according to a court filing from Friday. The proposed settlement, which still needs court approval, would be a dramatic cut from the CFTC's claim amounting to $52.2 billion in restitution, disgorgement, and civil monetary penalties in connection with civil enforcement actions the agency filed against FTX and its executives. The debtors say the CFTC is the, quote, most significant single creditor in these Chapter 11 cases, and that the debtors face very substantial potential liability to the CFTC. The regulator charged FTX, its founder Sam Bankman-Fried, and its sister hedge fund Alameda Research in December 2022, alleging that the crypto exchange commingled customer funds and that SBF violated the Commodities Exchange Act. According to Friday's filing, the proposed settlement would avoid the cost and delay of further litigation and, quote, mitigates a significant risk of diminution of the assets available for distribution to creditors. Next, today, Craig Wright, the man who claimed he invented Bitcoin, was referred to British prosecutors for allegedly committing perjury. Now, back in March, a UK judge ruled that the Australian computer scientist is not Satoshi Nakamoto as a result of a lawsuit brought forward by Jack Dorsey-backed Crypto Open Patent Alliance to prevent him from claiming himself as Bitcoin's inventor and suing Bitcoin developers. So now a British High Court judge has said that he has no doubt that he should refer relevant papers to determine whether Wright should be prosecuted for what he calls wholesale perjury and forgery of documents, to determine whether an arrest warrant should be issued and if extradition should be pursued. Wright's holding company, Tulip Trading, was not immediately available for comment when contacted by CNBC. All right, back to markets for our main story. Crypto World's Talia Kaplan spoke with Brian Dixon, CEO of Off-the-Chain Capital, about what factors are impacting crypto prices the most right now and what a potential imminent approval of spot ETH ETFs means for the price of digital assets in the near term.
This week kicked off with Bitcoin back above $60,000, with the cryptocurrency trading close to the $65,000 level early this afternoon. Now, Bitcoin's value started rising over the weekend following the failed assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Do you think investors are seeing an increased chance of a Trump victory in the upcoming presidential election? And do you think that's impacting crypto markets right now, especially after he announced crypto-friendly Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential candidate yesterday?
Yes, I do. I think that after the failed assassination attempt over the weekend, that we are definitely seeing a much stronger opportunity for people to support Trump. And we're seeing this right now with the tremendous support that's pouring out over him across the nation. And I do think people are looking at that as an opportunity for the support with the former president. Now, like you noted, he has selected a pro-crypto VP candidate for the race, J.D. Vance. We know from the disclosures that J.D. Vance holds Bitcoin as one of his assets as part of his portfolio. We've also seen Trump do a huge positive shift in the stance that he's taken on Bitcoin and digital assets in recent months compared to his last presidency. And with that, Trump will be speaking next week at the Bitcoin conference. And so it's very exciting to see that his team has actually confirmed this and that he will be there presenting to a very large audience of diehard Bitcoiners from around the world.
Now, other big news we're expecting soon, whether spot Ether ETFs will get the green light to start trading here in the U.S. That announcement could happen any day now. In fact, SEC Chair Gary Gensler told CNBC last month that spot ETH ETFs should be fully approved sometime over the summer. And Reuters reported yesterday, citing sources, that these products will likely begin trading on Tuesday. What would a potential approval do to the price of Ether and other cryptocurrencies in the near term and longer term?
Well, if we look what happened with Bitcoin when the ETF was passed in February of this year, we saw a tremendous inflow of new capital into the asset. And so if history repeats itself, and we see this with the Ethereum ETFs, if they are indeed passed next week, I would anticipate we're going to see an increase in inflows to the Ethereum ETFs, which would likely drive price. Now, what I'm excited about here is that the Ethereum ETF is now one more digital asset that will have a regulated on-ramp for retail and institutional investors to get exposure to the asset in the United States. And so this will create an easier on-ramp. It'll remove friction from getting exposure to the asset. So in time, I believe this will drive price. And it's also a positive step in the right direction for additional ETFs with new digital assets in the future to be approved.
And many believe that the approval of spot Ether ETFs would mark another major win for the crypto industry's campaign to push digital assets into the mainstream. It sounds like you hold that view, but do you? And what do you think an approval would mean for the industry as a whole? And how did the launch of spot Bitcoin ETFs in the US 6 months ago change crypto sentiment?
So I think the launch of the Bitcoin ETFs changed crypto sentiment in that it's now becoming much more formalized with the traditional financial system, because as a retail or institutional investor, you can log into your traditional brokerage account on Fidelity or Interactive Brokers or wherever you trade stocks and securities at, and you can now acquire Bitcoin via this ETF. And in terms of it creating more adoption to the larger digital asset network, I think this is very, very positive, because as Ethereum gets approved, one of the arguments for quite some time is Ethereum a security or a commodity? And if we're seeing Ethereum approved as an ETF, I think it's very likely that we could start to see other digital assets approved as well. Things like Solana, things potentially like Binance in the future. It really opens the door in terms of what the digital asset space can do in launching these products to the general public and to larger institutions in a regulated fashion. And I believe what that's going to do long term is just enhance the adoption rate of the whole market.
Expanding on what you just said, late last month, VanEck became the first asset manager to file an application for a spot Solana ETF in the U.S. And this month, SABO filed a request with the SEC to list ETFs tied to the cryptocurrency. According to SEC rules, the agency has 240 calendar days to decide whether to approve or deny SABO's 19B4 application to list the products from VanEck and 21 shares, putting the deadline in March 2025. So what do you think will happen there? What can we expect?
I think it really depends on how the SEC continues toward the digital asset space, because historically they've been very restrictive in approving these types of products. But what we saw with the Ethereum ETF is a complete 180-degree shift, because it looks like the SEC rather proactively reached back out to the filers of these products and wanted them to complete accelerated approval process documentation so that they could actually get these products live. I mean, that was a big difference from the Bitcoin ETFs, which took Grayscale over 10 years to get their product approved. And they ultimately had to pursue litigation against the SEC and have the courts decide to have the SEC re-review this product so it could go live in the markets. And then they approved all the Bitcoin ETFs. Now, how the SEC did that 180 on Ethereum, if that's the direction they continue to head, I would likely see a lot of these products hopefully get approved sooner than later.
Now, the last time you were on the show was about a month ago, where you discussed spot Bitcoin ETFs, noting that there were tremendous inflows early on, and you forecasted that we'll see much larger allocations toward the end of this year and the beginning of next year. Do you still feel that way? And what do you think the trajectory for spot Ether ETF allocations will be if those products do in fact get approved soon as expected?
I do stand by my statements that I think we'll see much larger allocations towards the tail end of this year, early next year with the Bitcoin ETFs. The reasoning for that, like I've noted before, is that the largest investors in the world have very long due diligence timelines. So the sovereign wealth funds, the pension plans, the endowments, these groups can take 12 to 18 months to complete their due diligence timelines, pass through their investment committees, educate their clients before they can ultimately make large allocations. And I think that's what we're still waiting on. I think with what occurred with Trump over this last weekend is actually maybe going to accelerate the process of digital assets and more allocations to Bitcoin. And we're seeing that right now with the inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs. I would expect the same thing to happen in regard to the Ethereum ETFs. I think once those will launch, we'll see an inflow initially. We'll see a big bump of allocations happening. And then for the larger institutional investors, that's going to probably take 12 to 18 months to go through their diligence timelines again before we could potentially see some larger allocations from those groups of investors.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today, but we'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.